Time now for our first guest of the day, our political panel. Annika Wells and Andrew Bragg joining me here in the studio. Thanks both for your time.
Good to be with you.
Hey, Tom.
We're talking a bit about the Royal Commission, not official details, but draft details have been located, shall we say, by the ABC. Now, the PM's spoken a lot about hazard reduction, obviously, and he's talking about making sure states hit their targets. Fire chiefs have been saying it's not a lack of intent, though. We're not saying, actually, are we, that the states are deliberately not achieving their reduction targets, are we? Is that what the government's claiming?
Well, I think the opportunity to have the Royal Commission is to look at all these issues. And obviously the Prime Minister is engaging with the states in good faith to get their views on what they think is important.
But
that's a good process.
Yeah, sure. But that sort of indication that these states, that's not good enough, the PM said the other day, they haven't been hitting their targets. It's not a lack of intent, we'd assume, still.
Well, let's see. I mean, we have to have the inquiry to work out what's happened. And I think the idea of asking people their view is good. I mean, I like consultation.
So why didn't you consult with the opposition over the terms of reference?
Well, you always consult with all the relevant authorities and people.
Consulting with all the states, that's a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah, sure, but not with the federal opposition. There are Labor MPs who have severely impacted bushfire communities, and I think those communities deserve to be represented and consulted about the terms of reference as well.
What have you made? There's been a lot of complaints about permission for burns, particularly smaller ones that might be around someone's property, and some of the limitations, including in Queensland as well, around distance between sort of properties and when you can cut down trees. Is it fair enough that that really gets closely looked at, that the old practices around conservation might have the wrong emphasis? Sure.
I do wonder whether that focus has been a bit of an ideological bent from some of the government members and their sort of position on the Palaszczuk government's land clearing. I'm happy to look at it, but I did note with concern that the PM in question time yesterday was talking about hazard reduction being a greater priority than emissions reduction. And when we think about this as a whole and what we're going to need to do, I think one of the terms of reference was adaptation action. Just how much adaptation is this government prepared to act on? Will they reduce emissions to zero by 2050 to avoid catastrophic climate change?
All right, I'm just seeing what's happening. We've got Mark Butler at the moment trying to suspend standing orders after Angus Taylor. I think, do we need to exit? All right, apparently we've got to let you go, Annika, so you can get to the House. So that's
ain't no mountain high enough when it comes to holding you lot to account, but I'm going to have to run.
All right.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Best wishes.
We'll see what happens with that division. Okay, well, yeah, you can walk out there, Annika, that's okay. This is how live TV operates. I'm left with you, Andrew Bragg, nothing wrong with that. But on the element of climate change as well, are you pleased to see this prominently within the terms of reference, that it's being recognised it's happening, and that's what this is predicated on, that this is a reality, because it doesn't seem to be an entire view of the coalition. There are some not convinced that's the case.
I'm not surprised at all that climate change is front and centre in this framework. This is exactly what the PM said at the press club just last week. And I think there have been important interventions from people like the Science Minister, Karen Andrews. I mean, we're not interested in having a debate about the science. The science is absolutely settled.
When you say we, though, it's not all of your colleagues.
Well, as I said, the government is very focused on the future in terms of what we can do to address climate change, but also deploy practical measures on the ground, and it's a combination of those factors which is important.
Does it frustrate you, though, with this party room stoush, as it's been labelled the other day, when people are exchanging views and there are still, particularly some of the Nats, not too sure it's even happening, wanting to debate the extent of climate change? That must be frustrating in terms of how you're perceived by voters.
No, really, the executive's been very clear that we're not wasting any time on those issues.
But Matt Canavan's just left the executive, and he seemed to be suggesting the government's focus is wrong and let's promote coal again.
People are entitled to a view, Tom. And as I said, the executive's been very clear about our focus and our priorities, and our policy is right, and I strongly support it.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Matthew Canavan was just in the executive, had this view, perhaps wasn't expressed as forthrightly. Now he's no longer in the executive, he can do that.
But, I mean, you're asking me what I think about our policy set as a backbencher, and I think it's the right...
No, I'm asking you about what you think about some of your colleagues still wanting to litigate the debate around climate change.
People are entitled to express their view. I've given you my view, and I've given you the view of the Science Minister and the Prime Minister. So, water goes one way.
All right. Electric cars as well, the numbers seem to finally start to be increasing in Australia. but still way behind other countries.
Yeah.
There's going to be a policy this year. Does it feel like it's coming a bit late?
Well, it's a very complicated thing to deploy. You need to electrify highways and homes and roads. So I think the plan that the Minister is working on to come out mid-year sounds right to me. I mean, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, who were here in Canberra last night, are already providing finance to people who want to get access to electric vehicles. So there's already some things happening.
The campaign, of course, featured the alleged war on the weekend for Labor's policy on electric vehicles. It's going to be pretty embarrassing if your plan's released and it's anywhere near Labor's target, which, remember, was 50% of new cars by 2030 to be EVs.
Well, I think Ernst & Young have said that by 2025 that the EV will be competitive with the internal combustion engine. So, I mean, we will always follow the science. If that is the market, then it needs to be facilitated on public roads. So that's what we will do.
And I'm sure people will be happy with that. But what does that say about what we heard during the campaign? Michaela Cash saying it's a war on the weekend. Labor's coming after your ute because of their not crazily ambitious plan on this.
Well, we never said electric cars were bad.
Well, it was a war on the weekend, isn't that bad?
We never said electric cars were bad. Now,
you said Labor's policy on electric cars.
There may have been some issues with their targets and the level of ambition.
Was there an issue with their target?
There may have been. But
what do you mean may have been?
Well, I can't remember the exact detail of what they were.
Well, they were going to have 50% of new car sales by the year 2030 to be electric vehicle cars. Is that a problem?
Well, we're doing the review. The Minister will release a plan by the middle of the year. But we've got to be methodical with these sort of policy areas because it is hugely complicated, the infrastructure change for the nation, if you think about the electrification of highways, roads and homes.
It is.
So let's not rush it, right? I mean, I don't think that these things are well resolved in an electrified, if I can use that term, environment of an election campaign. It would be better to be more methodical and develop it in more normal times.
Should any criticism be more methodical as well, rather than talking about a war on the weekend?
But as you know, election campaigns are always very electrified and people say all sorts of things.
Coalition government ministers?
Well, I mean, I still very much regret that the Labor Party said that we were going to privatise Medicare. I mean, that was the most absurd.
And they were lambasted rightly for that, but now I'm asking about this claim. You seem to be agreeing with that, expressly saying it, that was not a very truthful campaign.
Well, I mean, I can't remember the exact detail of Labor's plan. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm sure we will develop a very methodical approach this year.
All right. Just finally on the coronavirus, universities could be on the hook here for possibly hundreds of millions of dollars. Do they need compensation? Is this just what happens?
Well, it's a hugely important export industry, as you know, Tom. I think it's number 4 now. So if 20% of the overseas students are coming from China, then that is a significant factor in today's Australia. I'm sure that the Education Minister, Tian, is working with the sector to try and find a way to defer or easily manage some of those issues.
So there's the element of trying to soften the blow.
Yep.
If it's a really big financial hit, is it up to the government to help out, or is it, these are privately run enterprises, so if they take a hit, they take a hit financially? I mean,
universities is one of many sectors where it's a bit of a mixed market. I mean, there's obviously a significant amount of public funding, so I think it's a sort of area where you could see us deploy a pretty flexible approach. But I mean, if this was a similar economic impact as SARS in 2003, then you might see a reduction in GDP of a couple of basis points.
Are you comfortable with all of the management of it? There's concerns in particular about Indonesia's preparedness. Some people saying that the medical practices even seem to be very poor there. And this is very close to us, isn't it? Should we be sort of reaching out and making sure Indonesia has a handle on it so it doesn't affect Australia?
Well, the President is here next week, so no doubt people that are above my pay grade will be able to make those representations and get those answers.
All right. Well, only one side of the panel today, Andrew Bragg. You're lucky enough in the Senate not to be called out there, but appreciate your time. Chat
Thanks,
soon.
Tom. Good to see you.